One of my favorite fictionalized versions of a true story is the Mohave Incident. It tells the story of UFO encounters that happened over 20 years ago. It was also one of the most frightening stories I ever read about UFO encounters. It happened in October 1989, just days after the San Francisco earthquake. I grew up with the regular UFO stories, from the pilot in Washington to the Roswell story, Betty and Barney Hill, and finally to Travis Walton's story in Snowflake, Arizona. He is a man I see each year at the UFO Congress. None of the stories were as broad in scope as far as detail and time as this abduction, nor was there the subsequent follow-up from the aliens. It continued on for years. There is still paranormal activity in their home to this day, though more infrequent and less intense. It happened to a married couple named Dawn and Steve Hess. They stayed silent for decades until they came forward in the book. A book I picked up and read in one day. I just couldn't put it down. The Hess family were reluctant in revealing their identities in the book, but do relate their traumatic encounter and subsequent encounters to a friend named Paul Moran. He encourages the author Ron Felber to meet with them. Dawn and Steve Hess were going camping. They were a young married couple, with 2 children, living in Southern California in 1989. Steve planned a hunting trip combined with a getaway for he and his wife. They were going to go into the Mohave Desert, set up at a campground, and spend a couple of days alone. The first issue they ran into is the campground he normally went to was filled to capacity. It had never happened to him before. Steve was in an area he was familiar with, as his family had gone there when he was a child. They loved to camp, and were pretty outdoorsy. When the campground was not available, he had another plan. Now this was not Dawn's ideal getaway, but she went to please him and for some alone time with her husband. So he had to sell her on driving into a much more remote area near Tabletop Mountain in the desert. So the couple set up camp, and Steve grilled on the portable barbecue. The encounter started when he noticed one bright light above the horizon, brighter and bigger than the other stars. He got an uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach as he watched it. The light dropped below the horizon and disappeared. He watched carefully, but it did not reappear. After dinner, the couple was relaxing outside the camper, watching the beautiful night sky in the desert. They both noticed this formation of what looked like 9 bright stars. Except the stars were moving in alignment and making an M shape as they moved toward the couple. Both noticed the desert was dead silent, no sounds of any kind, no birds, no crickets, nothing. The lights seemed to be blinking in some sort of pattern as if they were communicating with each other. It was followed by what looked like descending troops with lights from the ships. Like they were using night vision goggles. The Hesses saw them move toward them in the darkness, so they quickly got inside the camper. Steve Hess grabbed his gun to defend himself. Both were frightened when they heard the sound of someone running across the top of their camper and growling sounds outside. Both saw the beings as small elfish-looking creatures with red eyes. The creatures swarmed the camper and there was no way to retreat. There was a low hydraulic-sounding hum that kept getting louder. Then it got quiet. The next thing that happened was the camper began to shake, and a mist filled the inside where Dawn and Steve were. There was no way to fight it. Steve and Dawn thought they were dead. It was the last thing they remembered until they both woke up at the same time, the following day. What had happened to them? What day was it? They were sure the world was invaded, but when they turned on the radio, the world seemed to be going on as usual. They both just wanted to get back home to their family, so they started the camper and went home. Next time what happens to the Hesses, stay tuned for part 2 of their story based the book The Mohave Incident by Ron Felber, based on true story of Tom and Elsie Gifford.